Yeah, it is, it's cool. Okay. We got 5 people here.
Is this on?
Yeah.
It's 7:30.
I know Aish is not here tonight.
Got quorum though, right? Not in the same house. We need 6.
No, we need 5. We got 5.
Yeah, I'll do it like this.
You guys ready to go?
Sometimes I have to do that.
It does happen. Give them 30 seconds.
Like how close do you have to be?
I don't ever do this. You get as far away from it. You almost
Are they
don't
gonna be
want
able to
them
hear
to
me?
hear you.
Oh, okay.
You don't want them to hear you, 'cause
Okay, good.
then they just make up what you're saying.
Are you serious? Can you hear me on the thing or no?
They can.
Okay. So what way over there is fine?
You guys ready to go? I'd like to call this meeting of the Bridgewater Town Council to order. Could we please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please ask everyone to have a moment of silence in recognition of veterans and those have passed. We have 2 condolences to read tonight. Our condolences go out to the family of Richard J. Sprouse on his passing on October 28, 2019. Mr. Sprouse served in the United States Army during the Vietnam War. He was active in youth activities as a member of the Bridgewater Youth Soccer Association for over 40 years. He coached many championship teams and was always there for the youth in our community. In addition, our condolences go out to the family of Donald E. Libby upon his passing on 12 November 2019. Mr. Libby served in the United States Marine Corps Reserve during the Vietnam War, and he retired from Bridgewater State University as a facilities maintenance foreman. Thank you. Good evening, everybody. This is our November 19th, 2019 Town Council meeting. Just want to remind everybody that this meeting is being aired live and being recorded at the same time. We have in your packet the approval for our minutes from our 2 previous meetings on October 29th and November 5th.
Motion to approve? Second.
Is it for both or just one?
Yeah, both.
There's a motion and there's a motion and there's a second to approve both the October 29th council meeting minutes and November 5th council meeting minutes. Any discussion?
Yeah, does Councilor Columbatus want him separated because he was absent for one but not the other?
Okay, I'll make a motion to approve Tuesday, October 29. Second.
And there's a second. All those, any discussion on that motion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Motion to approve November 5. Second.
There's a motion and there's a second on November 5th. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Seeing none, so both those meeting minutes have been approved. Just a couple of announcements this evening. First announcement, our January 7th, 2020 council meeting will be our annual joint budget meeting with the Finance Committee of both towns and the school committee with the council. So just this is an annual joint meeting we have as we begin the budget process for fiscal '21. That'll be held on January 7th, first meeting of the year. The second announcement is just a reminder to everybody that the 27th annual Christmas on the Common will take place December 1st, 2019 from 12 to 4 p.m. This is an annual event that the Bridgewater Business Association does an awful lot of work in putting this together. It's always a great time. So again, the 27th annual Christmas on the Common will be December 1st from 12 to 4 p.m. I believe there'll be a parade beforehand in which you'll see your counselors marching down, was it street, Prospect Street? Probably. So hope everybody can attend that. There are no proclamations this evening. I'll open up Citizens Open Forum. Are there any citizens here that wish to speak during the Citizens Open Forum portion of the meeting? Please come up to the podium and just state your business, and we'd love to hear from you.
Jim Candido, Stetson Street here in Bridgewater. Just want to take a few minutes to go over a couple of items. The first one is Stetson Street. First, I'd like to thank Mr. Dutton, Ledoux, and Wood for finally getting Stetson Street repaved. When we started our request, none of you were selectmen, councilors, or town managers in Bridgewater. That's how long it's taken to get it going. As you know, the street was deplorable, heavily used as a major cut-through, We finally only hear one sound when vehicles go up the street versus the cars and trucks and trailers flying over multi-layers. There was multi-layers on that street, ruts and holes. Holes were filled as called in. All the contractors did a very good job and were very professional in preparing the road, the sidewalks, and the curbs, and were under the watchful eye of Ron Ledoux each day. The town's limited crew also pitched in and did a lot of the prep work, and I thank them. Unfortunately, the wonderful sidewalks can't always be used due to cars and trucks parking on them. I still see people from Main Street with their electric wheelchairs going down Stetson Street on the street because of obstructions on the sidewalks. We also have a 45-minute limitation for parking on Stetson Street, but this has never been enforced during the day. Periodically, tickets are posted in the 2 to 4 a.m. range. When cars are parked, usually on both sides, especially on both sides, double lane violation is always the norm. Speeding cars, trucks, and motorcycles is still a major issue, especially in the early morning and late afternoon. Actually, this is a 7x24 issue. Even with all the work trucks on Stetson Street during the repaving process, police details still had to wave down speeders coming up the street during the work. Workers could not believe the amount of traffic on Stetson Street as they tried to negotiate getting out of their trucks. Each of you have your own agenda items, such as marijuana, boat ramps, plastic bags, kids' parks, nips, unsightly property, just to name a few. Two of mine are the placement of speed tables on Stetson Street, and this has been asked for years, and the enclosure of dumpsters. Take a ride up Stetson Street, or take a ride on any main street coming into Bridgewater. So hopefully those two things will be addressed. I've been asking for years for the placement of the speed tables on Stetson Street and have sent several emails after the road was completed with no response. This should be installed before winter, and I'd be glad to get quotes and provide information, installation timeframes if the town manager wishes. Hopefully they get installed before further discussion takes place for speed tables for the renovated Mitchell School to slow down parents and school bus drivers. We need the speed tables. We have to slow down the traffic of the BSU students and those using Stetson Street as a cut-through since they can't get through the center of town. I've mentioned the open dumpsters before to the council. This is very ugly, and it's a BR issue throughout the town. Over a year ago, I believe Councilors Wood and Souza stated that they would be sponsors, but again, I haven't seen or heard of any action. I've also sent several, I think both of you and the town manager, packets of a study that I did maybe 5 or 10 years ago from other surrounding towns here in Massachusetts on what they do regarding this issue. And finally, Mr. President, just a couple of comments on safety, congestion, and noise. I agree with the idea, and I'm not sure who the sponsor is, for the study of the pedestrian tunnel on Plymouth Street. This would be a major contribution to safety of our students and lessen the traffic congestion with the students trying to negotiate Plymouth Street. As an additional initiative to this proposal, I've sent emails to the town regarding trains. You, the representatives of the town, should be more forward-thinking and think out of the box regarding the speeding trains, the noise and safety. As you all know about the South Coast Rail Expansion Program coming through Bridgewater, this will have major impact on us, more of an impact. There will be increasing passenger trains, freight trains, and additional noise. What we are requesting is for you to address the issue and propose placement of the railroad tracks to be placed underground after Oak Street and before the window factory on Pearl Street, and come back up on the college property. I've heard that they may be looking at moving the tracks further on down past the Bridgewater State College Police Station. So this would be an opportune time to look at this major initiative. This would create a safer environment, lessen the traffic, congestion, and noise. Imagine freeing up the crossings for Broad and Plymouth Street and eliminating stoppage there for, say, 15, 20 times a day and night. Please work with our state senator, state rep, and the MBTA to finally invest in our community and a right to safety and peace and quiet. Other towns don't allow speeding trains through designated stops, but we do. And the town of Hingham and the residents of Hingham insisted on the MBTA to place their tracks underground for a longer distance than would be required from Oak to Plymouth Street in our town. And it's working fine. You go through Hingham Center, everything is underground, and that's what you call forward thinking. Thank you, and we hope you will discuss and escalate this to the appropriate people.
Is there anybody, thank you, is there anyone else here wishes to speak during the open forum portion of our meeting? Anybody else? Seeing none, I think the time is now past 7:35. I will open our public hearing at 7:42. Order FY 20030, FY 2020 classification tax allocation, adoption of residential factor. At their meeting held on October 28th, 2019, the Finance Committee voted 5-0 to recommend approval. The Budget and Finance Committee voted in favor of this measure on 11/5/19. This measure has been duly advertised in the Enterprise and on the town's website for a public hearing, therefore may be finally considered at the conclusion of this hearing. And I'll refer to the sponsor of this order, Mr. Town Manager, to make introductions.
Mr. President, thank you. As the council knows, most of the councilors know, every year we have a tax allocation hearing. It's a hearing to decide how we apportion taxes in Bridgewater. I believe Bridgewater's always been a equal one tax rate spread across the 3 or 4 different types of properties. But for this evening's hearing, I would like to introduce our Chief Assessor, Shelley McCauley, who will be happy to walk you through the process and what the Board of Assessors recommendation is, and then certainly take any questions from the council or the public, since it is a public hearing. So with that, I'd introduce Shelley.
Good evening, councilors. My name is Shelley McCauley, the Chief Assessor for the Town of Bridgewater. For the public hearing tonight on the issue of adopting the tax levy percentages for fiscal year 2020, I will present information and data relevant to making a determination. The Board of Assessors have determined the assessed valuation of all taxable real and personal property reflecting full and fair cash value as of January 1st, 2019, as required by Mass General Laws. The information was submitted to the DOR and approved on November 14th, 2019. The assessed valuation breakdown is as follows. Residential class, $2,765,737,806. Commercial class was $223,824,504. Industrial class was $97,797,040. And personal property was $87,822,430, for a total taxable value of $3,175,181,780. The residential percentage share of the tax levy at full and fair cash value is 87.11, up from 87.08. The commercial, industrial, personal property percentages share of the tax levy at full and fair cash value is 12.89, down from 12.92. Calculating and setting the tax rate is a component of a larger process we call the recapitulation process. A municipality's entire budget plan for the fiscal year is laid out on the recap sheet. It lists all appropriations made by the legislative body since the previous year's tax rate was set. Anticipated and actual sources of revenue other than property taxes, such as state aid and estimated local receipts, are also identified. The difference between the appropriations and revenue from these sources must be raised through property taxes. This difference is called the tax levy. Total amount to be raised this year is $74,458,543. The estimated receipts and other sources is $27,688,115. Therefore, the estimated tax levy for fiscal year 2020 is $46,770,428. The levy limit, the maximum a community can levy in any given year, is equal to the prior year's levy limit plus amended new growth, the annual 2.5 increase, new growth, and overrides. Fiscal year 2019 levy limit was $42,480,624. Amended new growth this year was $4,975. The annual 2.5% increase was $1,062,140. New growth this year was $791,546. Therefore, the total estimated levy limit for fiscal year 2020 is $44,339,285. In order to calculate the 2020 maximum allowable levy, we take the fiscal year estimated levy limit of $44,339,285 plus any debt exclusions, which was $2,432,617. The total maximum allowable levy this year was $46,771,902. The difference between the maximum allowable levy of the $46,771,902 and the tax levy of $46,770,428 is the excess levy capacity. The excess levy capacity for fiscal year 2020 is estimated at $1,474.39. You, the town council, must decide the percentages of the tax levy each class of real property and personal property will bear each year. To do so, a residential factor is adopted. The residential factor governs the percent of the tax levy to be paid by each class. The adopted factor cannot be less than the minimum residential factor calculated by the DOR. This year is 92.5979. If a factor of 1 is adopted, the tax rate would be the same for all classes. This rate is determined by dividing the tax levy by the total value of all taxable property in Bridgewater and then multiplying that result by 1,000. Therefore, fiscal year 2000 estimated tax levy of $46,770,428 divided by the value of $3,175,181,780 is 0.01473. Multiplied by 1,000, the estimated tax rate for fiscal year 2020 is $14.73. I have included in the handouts different what-if scenarios, which shows the residential factor of 1 through 92.5979 and the respective share percentages, levy amounts, and estimated tax rates. Please note, the total tax levy remains the same. Shifting the tax burden from the residential class to the commercial, industrial, personal property classes does not increase the amount of money that will be raised through property taxes. Also, this year, the average single-family assessed value for fiscal year 2020 is $397,218, up from $385,759 in fiscal year 2019, which is an increase of 2.97%. And the average business commercial assessed value for fiscal year 2020 is $736,981, up from $695,402 in fiscal year 2009, which is an increase of 5.98%. If the town council adopts a residential factor of 1, the estimated average single-family tax bill would be $5,851, which is an increase of $130 from last year, and the estimated average commercial tax bill would be $10,856, which is an increase of $543. Historically, the town of Bridgewater has always maintained a single tax rate.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions from the general public regarding this order? Are there any questions from the general public regarding this? Anybody from the general public that wishes to speak in favor of this? Anyone from the general public that wishes to speak in favor? Seeing none, is there anyone here from the general public that wishes to speak in opposition of this proposal? Is there anybody here that wishes to speak in opposition of this proposal? Seeing none, I will open it up to my colleagues for questions from the council. Mr. Wood.
Thank you, great presentation. A lot of information, as always. And we always make it transparent, there's reports and everything else, so anyone has questions can ask. Two questions. So I heard you say at one point that, talk about the tax levy and the debt on top of the tax levy makes up the total tax, and then you went through the math and showed how you came up with the rate.
Maximum, yep.
That does not include the latest excluded debt, right?
No, it does not.
Okay. So that'll kick in some future date. We don't need to worry about that right now.
Correct.
In the process, do you add, I know in the past we've talked about bands, which are bond anticipation notes. Does that become part of the calculation at some point?
What?
In general terms?
Yes.
Yes, okay. And then finally, if I can, so the commercial rate that you're using, 12.89%, dropped a little bit. And so that's as a percent, that's as a percentage of overall town valuation.
Correct.
Correct. Okay, excellent.
It just shifted, I think, 0.04 each
It sounds
way.
like the excess capacity limit's like 6 decimals out to the right, as it's $1,000 on
I
multi-million
think that's the
dollars.
closest we've come in.
Yeah. Thank you.
Anybody else? Mr. Fitzgibbons?
I'll pick up on what Mr. Wood was talking about, excess levy capacity. We're taxing the people and businesses of Bridgewater as much as we possibly can, correct? Without an override.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Is that the case in other towns around us? East Bridgewater, West Bridgewater, Halifax, all the towns that are in here? I don't know if that's a question for you or the town manager.
3 out of the 5 that I use.
3 out of the 5, which of the 3 tax as much as possible?
Yes.
Which of the 3
Oh,
do you know?
I'm sorry. Halifax, East Bridgewater, and who else do I use?
Middleborough, Rainham, West Bridgewater.
Okay, so it's 2 out of the 3.
Okay, so East Bridgewater and Halifax,
A single tax rate.
no, use all of their levy capacity.
Oh.
That's what I'm asking.
Oh,
Who
yes.
uses all of their levy capacity?
I'm not really sure. I could look that up for you, though.
Okay, that would be great, because I'm pretty sure that Rainham does not, and
I think Rainham does. Last year, they left some on the table, so.
and I'm pretty sure West Bridgewater does not. I don't know about East Bridgewater, Halifax, and Middleborough, but I may be wrong, so that's okay. All right, so we don't have, as Mr. Wood pointed out, we don't have the Mitchell School debt exclusion factored into this year's taxes because we're not being assessed for it yet, right? I see here if we adopt a different residential factor, in fact, the smallest residential factor we can get, we could lower individuals' residential property taxes by $433, essentially offsetting the cost of the Mitchell School override and putting it on our businesses. Why is that a bad idea, Mr. Dutton?
I think in general, shifting the tax burden to businesses historically has been something that the council, and prior to that, the Board of Selectmen has shunned, primarily because we don't have, if we had a much larger business or commercial base, it may make sense, but in a time when we're trying to recruit as much quality business as we possibly can recruit, one of our primary recruitment tools, ironically, is the fact that we have a single tax rate. Brockton has a split rate that is the subject of a lot of debate every year, and a comparable commercial business in Brockton probably spends right now about double the amount in taxes that, as they would in Bridgewater.
Thank you for setting me up perfectly for my last question. Referring to page 7, the difference between the residential tax rate and the commercial industrial property tax rate in the 5 reference communities. So it would cost for a business valued at $1 million. I'm just pick that number out of the air because it's easy. It would cost $3,000 more roughly in East Bridgewater and Halifax to run that business in taxes, $2,000 more in Middleborough, $5,000 more in Rainham, and $13,000 more in West Bridgewater to run the exact same $1 million property tax valued business, if I read the numbers correctly.
Without looking at those numbers, I'd say that's probably quite accurate.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions from the councilors? Any other questions regarding this? Seeing none, I will now close the public hearing at 7:56.
Motion to set a residential factor of 1.
Second.
It is a motion to set the residential factor at 1, and there's a second. Any discussion on that? Seeing none, this requires a roll call vote. No? Yes, this requires a roll call vote.
Mr. Souza.
Yes.
Mr. Chase.
Yes.
Mr. Wood.
Yes.
Mr. George.
Yes.
Mr. Gallagher.
Yes.
Mr. Rushton.
Yes.
Mr. Columbotus.
Yes.
Mr. Fitzgibbon.
Yes.
8 in favor, none against.
Thank you, Shelley.
Thank you very much. There's a document here that I'm going to be passing around that you all will need to sign in the white area, either underneath or next to my name. Thank you. Any other votes we need to take on that? No? Okay, moving on to license transactions. We have petition P2019-027, change of officer at the Bridgewater Citizens Club.
Motion to approve.
Second.
There's a motion to approve, and there's a second. Any discussion on that? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We have no presentations this evening. We'll move on to the town manager's report, and under A, we have a Mitchell School update.
Mr. President, we put the Mitchell School on a recurring basis, but I don't have a whole lot to report on the Mitchell School, but I will recap just what you all already know, but for those who are watching, as you know, the town residents in October voted to debt exclude the $80,600,000 cost of the new school. Right now, roughly $46.7 million will be borne by local taxpayers, and the balance will be funded through MSBA grants. So that is where we stand now. So moving forward, just to give you a little bit of update on the timeline, we're now entering the design development phase, which will be now through February. That's essentially where the plans are refined. Space needs are refined, the site plans are refined, everything is brought into a little more detail than was existed in the schematic phase. After February, the development of construction documents will take until August, the end of August of 2020, or beginning of August of 2020, next August. There's a 2-month bid process right after that. And notice to proceed, if all goes according to schedule, notice to proceed will occur in November, early November of 2020. It's an 18 to 20 month construction process, which means that we'd be looking at getting students back in a new building in September of 2022. So that's a very rough timeline. The designer and architect and the OPM have outlined each, so far, the subject matter of each building committee meeting, and so they've organized a pathway following this timeline, a pathway forward to get the school open in 2022. Hopefully, it will go smoothly. There are always some bumps in the road, but I think the new building process that the state requires, both through MSBA and also through statute, is going to help us. It's going to help us. It's a lengthy building process and designing process, but we're dedicated to getting it done right. Obviously, as I've said many times before, whatever we build and whatever kind of construction we do, we're either we're either going to do it right or we won't do it at all. So, so I'll continue to say that. So that's what I have in the Mitchell. I don't know if anybody has any questions on
A
that.
couple. Mr. Fitzgibbons, yeah.
Just a quick one. So the roof collapsed in what, winter of?
February of 2015.
February 2015, and the school district and the town have moved as expeditiously as possible through the process, never missing a deadline with the SBA, and scheduling a vote and getting a vote done and moving through the process, and you keep, you keep updating us, which I appreciate very much, but it did take 6 years to build a school, essentially. 6.5.
Correct.
Thank you.
Yep.
Mr. Woods?
That's almost accelerated.
I want to relate this back to our residential and commercial factors and the tax rates. So the right up on the Easton building, the curve of the affected tax on the residents looks very different than ours, with a small amount in the beginning, increasing to a larger amount, and then dropping off again. So my question is, in just 30 seconds, you don't have to go into the full detail. Who pays for the early portion of the construction? And when does the debt exclusion actually hit the town of Bridgewater tax bills?
So obviously their expense, I got 30 seconds. Obviously their expenses early on, as you get construction going, you incur a lot of expense. During the construction process, you incur a lot of expense, $80 million worth. So during the construction phase, bond anticipation notes are floated, not to use technical terms, but we borrow, but the borrowing is considered a bond anticipation note. So we pay the interest as those borrowings are done. We pay interest. It's kind of like a construction loan on your house. If you're building a house, you borrow a chunk of money to build a house, you're paying interest on that. Once you roll that into a permanent mortgage, then you're paying principal and interest from there on out. So the expenditures over the next couple of years will be enormous. The amount that we are paying on bond anticipation notes, I believe, is interest only, and Lori is gone. So
Everybody left you.
nobody's got my back.
By yourself.
So over the course of the construction process, we're paying interest only, which is why we're not paying a whole lot for the first few years. Once that building, presumably in September of 2022, once that building is issued a certificate of occupancy, the permanent borrowing will be done. And at that point, then for fiscal 2023, we'll be budgeting and people will see a jump in their taxes.
So from fiscal 2023, there will be a 25-year bond payment. Prior to that, there's bank and bond anticipation note interest payment. But is that interest, this is why I asked Shelley about the ban, right? Is that interest then rolled into our tax factor in anticipation of the bond, or how are we paying that interest?
That minimal interest expense is rolled into the amount that we need to raise.
So the amount of taxes is actually longer than 25 years. It's 25 years plus the ban interest payments.
Right. Which are relatively small
On $80 million.
compared to the principal and interest costs. Yeah.
Right.
Anything else on the Mitchell School? Okay, next item we have is the update on development on the parking permit ordinance from Councilor George had an issue.
He did, and we have, I've asked Jennifer Burke, our Community and Economic Development Director, to give us some ideas about types of ordinances that we can look at. The issue, and if Councilor George can correct me if I'm wrong, but the issue that we're seeing is the use of private lots or private property that may not even be parking lots being used or used as paid parking during some high traffic events, which are usually BSU related. And those arguably arguably cause a number of safety and congestion issues. If you've got people parking, backing in, backing out on the main thoroughfares during a time when people are here that may not have much experience driving in Bridgewater. That's a safety issue. Especially at arrival and departure times, you can have congestion issues that are just caused by people trying to get out of unauthorized parking spaces. So we've looked at a couple of different options. One option is to do nothing, just let things continue as they are now. Another option is to develop an ordinance which would require some sort of town license in order to use a lot for paid parking. And then another third option would be adoption of a zoning ordinance, which would require some sort of site plan approval for a paid parking, which is probably a little bit extreme if we're looking at only tackling, a temporary use of a piece of property. So sort of narrowed down and looked at developing an ordinance that would require some sort of town license or town permit to use a piece of property for paid parking. We're not looking at this as an attempt to try to raise funds. In fact, I think we're looking at merely trying to know what is out there, be able to prepare for it, and if necessary, require the property owner to hire a police detail so that it doesn't cause some safety issues. So I guess, from my perspective, I know we didn't list this as a discussion item, but if counselors, I know Counselor George, we've talked about this a little bit. If other counselors have any thoughts, please feel free to reach out and let me know or let Jennifer know so that we can sort of craft something that meets the expectations of the council moving forward. So that's.
Yeah, if I could add to that. So, thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Mr. Dutton. So, just to reiterate what Mr. Dutton said, this is driven by safety. This is not my attempt, or we'll say the town's, to generate any type of revenue. It is a nominal fee. But as it stands right now, the town does not have any ability to determine where people can park on private property, how many cars, and if there is a public safety issue, concern. My understanding is public safety officials cannot do anything unless there's actually an accident or something to that effect. What I witnessed last year really drove home the point around making sure that people that are going to offer that service are approaching the town so that town officials can go in and actually determine where they can park. Let me take a step back. This is not going to reflect what Foxborough does. Totally different animal. That is a huge revenue generator for them. This is more on the public safety side. So with that is being able to determine where they can park, how many they can park, and then, as Mr. Dutton said, making sure that public safety is not taking any type of hit, either with cars entering or exiting as well. What I've seen so far, it's not overly complicated, but I think it does give us the ability to manage it and also to take appropriate actions if, in fact, we feel that there is an issue with the parking. Thank you.
Mr. Gibbons? Yep.
With what both Mr. George and Mr. Dutton have said, and with the hopefully acceptance of the chairman of the committee, I'd suggest that the town manager bring it to the Public Safety Committee, and we can workshop it with him and then bring it forward in the committee report or something like that. And, obviously everyone's welcome to come, their public meetings, et cetera, but if it's a public safety issue, I think that our committee should probably take the lead on it.
Yep, that's fine. I can develop an
ordinance
we
or
can
something,
distribute
yeah.
that. That's suitable. Good.
Anything else on that issue? Moving on, the striping of private parking lots update. Councilor Columbotus requested this update.
I think we had probably over a year ago, we had some issues especially during the winter months when there wasn't as much daylight out, trying to identify striping in some of the private lots, specifically down at the CVS and the Walgreens. We did have good, I think at the time I mentioned that we probably didn't have a whole lot of recourse in requiring striping. It just made, perfect business sense to stripe your lot so that, you're not creating an accident scene on your property. Although CVS and Walgreens probably would benefit from that, but in any case, we contacted both of them. To my knowledge, they actually both did do some striping. I'm probably wearing off a little bit now, but they did repaint some of their directional signage on the pavement, which is good. I did actually have a discussion with Ms. Burke about this. Technically, when a developer or a builder submits a site plan and identifies parking spaces and identifies striping and numbers of lots and so forth, her opinion is technically if the striping disappears over time, that you could be in violation of your site plan approval. And we'll hold on to that and use that if we have to. I don't know that we would go to the extreme of shutting down a business, probably not a particularly business-friendly strategy, but in the extreme, if somebody just was extremely obstinate and did not want to restripe a dangerous parking lot, in theory, we could shut their doors because they'd be in violation of their site plan approval. So it took a while, but reaching out to the management and the ownership of those particular businesses did, I think, resulted in something good. And if that's, we'll continue to use that method unless the council opts to do something different. But that's kind of where we are on that. Roach Brothers seems to be okay. I was looking at some of the larger lots around. They seem to be okay. I think Walgreens seems to be, CVS seems to be. And if counselors see lots that are heavily used, especially that need restriping, feel free to reach out, and I'm happy to reach out to those businesses and see if I can get them to restripe. So that's what I have on that one.
I'm a little confused. It seemed like at first you said we have no recourse, and then towards the end you said it constitutes a violation of site plan approval. So we have recourse, but you're hesitant to use it because you don't want to be hostile to businesses, is what you're saying.
Well, somewhat, but what I meant, if I wasn't clear, back when we first had this discussion, I didn't think we had any recourse to speak of. After speaking with Jennifer, I realized that we do have recourse. That's recourse probably in an extreme case, the site plan approval. But if we were that extreme, then yeah, we'd use that recourse. But certainly, I'm happy to reach out to business owners, and I'd rather create that line of communication and that line of recourse than sort of go in with the hammer.
You don't want to play hardball right away. You want a sort
Correct.
of cooperative arrangement. But
Correct.
the Walgreens lot in particular, the egress and ingress on Summer Street, that's a really tough spot. And in fact, a woman was killed, a pedestrian was killed on that street a few years ago. So I would hope that businesses in town would realize that it's in the public interest and everyone's interest for people to be safe, and you wouldn't need to play hardball. But I appreciate the effort. Thank you.
Mr. Fitzgibbons?
No offense to our town planner, who's a very great town planner, one of the best ever. But we have a very great town attorney, one of the best ever, except for Mark Gilday.
That is true.
Maybe we should ask him the question, not tonight, but you got a legal opinion from a town planner. I'd like a legal opinion from a town attorney.
I mean, I certainly have plenty
not tonight.
I have plenty of opinions on it. I don't know if you would want me to opine on any of them, and
No, I
an
just said not
open
tonight.
meeting.
You guys can have, I said not tonight. You guys can have an attorney-client privilege conversation, and we can move on, but.
Well, I guess what I would say is this relative to that. So a lot of things like that may involve strategy from a litigation standpoint that probably is not appropriate in an open meeting.
That's why I said we're not talking about it tonight, yet you keep talking about it. I don't understand what
Well,
what
do you
part of
want
we're not
do
talking
you want an
about it
opinion
tonight.
in the future, or you just want?
No, I was just suggesting, I wasn't even talking to you, I was talking to the town manager. I said, perhaps you'd like to talk to the town attorney to find out legal opinions, not the town planner, that's all.
Fair
Thank you.
enough.
See, I only got 30 seconds.
Okay. Any other questions on the private parking lots? Moving on to town hall updates, specifically two items, the inclusion on National Register and the progress on removal of the second floor partitions. This was brought to you by Mr. Columbotus for some updates.
Yes, and I do apologize to the council. We have dragged our feet on the National Register one for no reason other than we've had a lot of other things going on. However, we do have a scope of services out to consultants, although there's not quite the same procurement intensity on this as there are in some other of our building projects in particular. I did set a date due back for second week in December, so we will have somebody on board and get that going in earnest second week in December. And I don't anticipate any issue there. After speaking with a couple of consultants, it seems like it's a ripe property for inclusion. It's already on the Massachusetts list. The details are all on Macris, which is the Mass Historic website. So I don't anticipate any hiccups there. It's just a process, I think, as some of the counselors know from the McElwain building, which was, I think, most recently done. It is a bit of a process. So we will have somebody on board, if not your next meeting, certainly the meeting after that, and I can give you a bigger, more robust report on that one. So the removal of the room partitions in the town hall actually ties into that. One of my discussions, well, both of my discussions with two different consultants on the adding the building to the National Historic Register, they asked what the status of the building was, a lot of details on that. I explained that the second floor was carved up at that we had, done some decommissioning of the electrical system with our local technical high school. Had used it as an educational opportunity. They decommissioned a lot of the old added, fluorescent lights in the drop ceiling and so forth. And so I started to talk about the office space, and we were going to deconstruct, bring the space back to what it was originally, which was a beautiful open space with a small stage at one end of the building, which would really highlight the attractiveness of the space for future use. They actually suggested that we put the brakes on that for a little while because some of those partitions could actually be historic. So anything, and I couldn't find a date on when those partitions were installed. So historic, according to Massachusetts, no, the partitions are probably in the 80s. I don't know if anybody on the council recalls when those partitions went up, but.
Why would they be historic if they were put up in the 1980s?
Well, historic is now 50 years.
50?
Yeah. So if it was 50 years ago or more, they could National Park Service, which runs the program, could consider those historic, which I suggested. I was being funny, but they didn't think it was funny. By both of the consultants, I said, "You mean so all that really hideous, fake wood paneling in the 1970s actually could be considered historic?" And they said, "Absolutely." So anyway, they weren't they were just suggesting that we put the brakes on that for just a little bit, just to establish that they are not, all those partitions are not 50 years old, and I don't believe they are, so. But that is still obviously something we want to get done. And my assumption is, as somewhat related to this, is that the consultant, the feasibility study that we're going to do is going to establish potential cultural uses for that building, arts and cultural uses for that building, the highest and best use under those guidelines. And my strong assumption is that they're going to suggest that all of those partitions be removed anyway. So if the historic consultant can give us the go-ahead, and then the cultural feasibility consultant can give us the go-ahead, and then I think then we'll be off and running. So that's a little bit of an update on that. And if you have 1970s paneling in your basement of your house, you might want to get it out before it's considered historic.
Any questions regarding the update on the town hall? Anybody? Mr. Chase?
Thank you, Mr. President. If I could, through you to the town manager, just a question as to the, I guess what I'd call the winterization of town hall. I'm just wondering if it's, really in buttoned up shape. Is the roof in order? Is there, potential or actual leaking, mildew, these types of problems?
Nope, that's a great question. There's no, if the roof looks bad from the outside, and in fact, in my 6 years, it's gotten noticeably worse, but there are no leaks currently. So I think I may have mentioned this before, but one of the incentives for us to go through the feasibility phase with the Cultural Council's partnership is that when we get to the conclusion of that, then the next phase is for capital funding. So if we can secure capital funding for that building, primarily it's going to, my guess right now is it's going to go to the roof, it's going to go to make improvements on the inside, handicapped accessibility, bathrooms, and those are all available state funds that we can apply for and likely secure if we get through the feasibility phase successfully. So I'm not inclined to be spending a lot of money on that building, and your question is specific to winterization, but I'm not inclined to spend a lot of money on that building unless we absolutely have to the roof, for instance. If the roof had leaks in it or significant problems, then we'd have to revisit that decision. But right now, there are no leaks in the attic or any leaks evident on the other floors. I think, as the council knows, the furnace, the boiler is dead. We did put some temporary heat on the first floor in a couple of the rooms that house some of the files the town has. The second floor is completely cleaned out, so there's no more furniture, debris, or any of that on the second floor. So the only floor that actually houses significant files are the old treasurer's office and the old accounting office on the first floor. Some additional files in the clerk's office as well. So, to answer your question, temporary heat currently, water's shut off, electricity is on, and so we're limping along with that until we go through the feasibility process and then the capital grant application.
Okay. Thank you.
Council Wood?
A couple questions on the updates. Are there still files in the basement that need to be taken care of?
There are a number of files in the basement that need to be, many of them likely can be disposed of, but we'll let the secretary or the state archivist's office give us more guidance on that. A lot of old financial dot matrix records. There are some records that date back quite a long way. Town clerk has pulled some of those out and set those aside to make sure that those don't get damaged. But there's nothing in the basement that's changed. The condition of the basement hasn't changed. We did throw out a lot of files that had seen a lot of mold damage from years ago, and the state archivist gave us recommendations on those. But some of the old records are, as I say, with the town clerk's office. There are some less old records dating back to late 1800s, early 1900s, still in the basement.
The bulletin board outside used to post meeting notices. I don't think that would be part of the National Register piece, but I think it was a Boy Scout project at one point. So what's the plan for that? Because it still has like 2-3 pieces of paper stuck in it from meeting notices.
I think at this point, either remove the plastic, one of the plastic doors blew off number of years ago, and the other, I think there's another one there, and but the sign itself is crooked. So I'm inclined either to take it off, take the other plastic door off, try to straighten it, and just leave it for any community notices that folks want to put there. But recognizing that that's not really we don't do that anymore. It's very likely that the sign may just come out. Probably get saved until it can be reinstalled somewhere else, cleaned and reinstalled somewhere else, but there's no purpose for it at this point.
Thank you.
Any other questions regarding that? Okay, just an item E, does anybody have anything right now they want to put on the agenda under town manager for next meeting? If you don't, again, our next meeting is, go ahead.
Update on Broad Street.
Update on Broad Street for our next meeting. And remember, if you have anything that comes up in your mind between now and then before the next agenda goes out, you certainly can call Ann and let her know you like that under town manager report. Our next meeting is December 3rd. Discussions? None. Committee reports. Are there any committees that wish to give a report on any activity that they've had? Anybody? Seeing none, we'll move on to legislation for action. Under L, Resolution FY 20-006, supporting the reduction of underage vaping in Bridgewater schools. This measure was not referred to any committee. 14 days has elapsed per the charter per the council rules and procedures. Therefore, this measure may be finally considered this evening.
Motion to approve.
Second.
It's a motion to approve, and there's a second. Any discussion on that? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Resolution is adopted. There is no old business. Under new business, we have Order FY 20034, Transfer Order Collective Bargaining Agreement Obligation from the United Steelworkers Union.
Mr. President, if I may, could I make a motion to refer all of A through D under new business to the Budget and Finance Committees?
Yes, you can. Is there a second?
Second. And we can discuss them all now. I'm just trying to.
There is a second, and is there any discussion on any of those items we are referring?
Did you include D? Is D a budget and finance item, or is it something
There is
else?
money.
There is money? Yes. It would be.
D is not. Just A, B, and C.
I thought I saw money in there.
The D, no.
I may be wrong.
I would recommend we treat it separately, given that it's
Okay.
not a contract thing.
A through C. I'll modify my motion.
And there's a second for that, so are there any discussions on referring A, B, and C to the Budget and Finance Committees? This will come back to us for a vote, final vote in a meeting or two. Okay, seeing none, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? So we'll be seeing those in a few more meetings. Order D does not require any referral. It's an order of taking a property on Elm Street. So I guess at this juncture, the procedure would be to schedule a public hearing for this activity, or for this order. And we could schedule that for December 19th, 2019, the second meeting in December. We'll schedule a hearing for that.
So, Mr. President, I see what Councilor Fitzgibbons is saying, that the second to last paragraph does talk about damages. Do we need to have FinCom and Budget and Finance recommend on that amount, or is it just part of an agreement?
So if I could, the reason that you've actually already voted a version of this, and unfortunately, according to state law, the order of taking has to be within a certain number of days of the actual execution. And so the town attorney is advised that we need to sort of re-up this. You've, as I say, you've already voted a version. So we have to vote this version so that we keep to the timeline and the dates. So I can also tell you, you've already appropriated the amount of quote-unquote damages. And the taking, this is the National Grid property at the corner of Elm Street and Pleasant. So you've already, National Grid is in agreement with the taking. When we originally proposed, going back a couple of years now, when we had originally proposed an easement, they had preferred that we actually take it because they wanted to rid themselves of any underlying liability for continued ownership in the fee of the property. So again, you've already seen this. You have to re-up it because of the timelines. And National Grid is in agreement with the taking and certainly does not object working with us.
Okay,
so
we
we're
just
all-
keep it at this level.
Yes, so we'll schedule a public hearing for this for December 19th. It doesn't require a vote, we'll just schedule it. Okay, citizens' comments. Are there any citizens here that wish to speak during the citizens' comments portion of our meeting? Yes, not, nobody's here. Council comments for this evening. I'll start on my far right with Councilor Souza.
No comment this evening, sir.
Mr. Chase.
No comments.
Mr. Wood.
I'll say, as I usually do this time of year, the Lions, Bridgewater Lions will be setting up the decorations this Saturday after Thanksgiving in preparation for Christmas on the Common. As we all do, I hear reports from the storage area, things are in good shape. We'll probably reach out to some additional volunteers, so if you know anyone that needs hours or something like that, we'll make him or her a lion for a day to help out for a couple hours that morning. I also wanted to mention, you may have noticed I asked questions about the town hall. I am now allowed to talk about Central Square. My mother had a piece of property that was close to the square, and there was always a perceived conflict of interest. I had a long discussion with the Ethics Commission about that one day in reference to this building, because as you recall, I always had to step out during meetings, and I was really upset about that because I lived across the street for many years and saw this building in disrepair, so getting involved in the restoration was always a hope, but for since the time I got on the council, I couldn't do anything about that. So now that the property is in other hands, I'm free to opine and work on downtown issues. We'll talk about, stop signs and yield signs and traffic patterns and economic zones and other things. We'll talk about fire departments and firehouses and town halls and other things that were too close to the piece of property for me to actively work on. So I look forward to doing that, and hopefully we'll get things moving. Thank you.
Mr. George.
Thank you. Just looking forward to Christmas on the Common.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mr. Rushton.
No comments.
Mr. Columbotus.
I just, as everyone probably knows, a pedestrian was hit on Plymouth Street and not in a crosswalk. I'm not here to assign blame, but I'm just expressed continuing concern about pedestrian safety in town. I was driving up Main Street this afternoon and saw a woman at a crosswalk trying to cross with a baby stroller. I stopped and at least 6 or 7 cars in the opposing directions continued to blow right through across the crosswalk. And yeah, she was able to cross eventually, but I think we're sending a really bad message to people who want to walk, that you're a second-class citizen, despite state laws, mandating that you have right of way across a crosswalk. So I don't know what we can do. I think I brought up the issue of enforcement. Apparently, the police department doesn't see it as a priority but I think if the word were to get out that we enforce the state law requiring that drivers yield to pedestrians in the crosswalk, I think the word would get out that we're serious about it, and it would change we'd see some real changes, and I continue to urge us to make that a priority. Thank you.
Mr. Fitzgibbons?
I'd just like to wish my fellow counselors and everyone at home a happy Thanksgiving, and look forward to seeing Christmas on the Common.
And I want to thank everyone that participated in the Veterans Day Parade last Monday. It was a great showing in West Bridgewater, and we will be the host next November here in Bridgewater. And I appreciate the effort of the Vets Agent and the new Director of the Council on Aging in hosting some senior veterans down the Senior Center earlier last week for a luncheon. It was very well attended, and it was a good, nice event to see them out there. I want to again wish everyone a happy Thanksgiving with their families. Hopefully everyone will see us marching down the street with our banner for the Christmas on the Common. And our next meeting is not until December 3rd. We do have an executive session this evening, so I will entertain a motion to move into executive session under Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A6, to consider the purchase, exchange, lease, or value of real property if the chair declares that an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the negotiating position of the public body. And we will adjourn the meeting from executive session. This does require a roll call.
So
vote.
moved.
Second.
There's a second to go into executive session. Take a vote.
Mr. Fitzgibbons.
Yes.
Mr. Columbotus.
Yes.
Mr. Rushton.
Yes.
Mr. Gallagher.
Yes.
Mr. George.
Yes.
Mr. Wood.
Yes.
Mr. Chase.
Yes.
Mr. Suzak.
Yes.
8 in favor, none against.
So we are in executive session. Is there anybody in the back room?